Hey, thanks for listening. I'm David Yak here for Yak About Today, and I've been thinking about the podcasts I listen to on aging. So there really are many good ones besides Yak About Today, and I'll try to share them with you on a regular basis. Each one of them have their own personality and focus, so I thought it was high time that we all began collaborating. So for our season-ending show, I've invited Marc Miller, whose book Repurpose Your Career, a practical guide for the second half of life. He'll be our last guest before we start Season 6 of the all-new Yak About Today. So stay with us as we yak about today. What's up, everybody? David Yak here for Yak About Today, hoping you are better, healthier, and more informed than any generation that came before. So if the years 46 to 64 mean something to you, then this is the place you want to be. Now put your headphones on, go for a run, and listen to what we yak about today. And we are back. I'm here with Marc Miller. He is the author of Repurpose Your Career, a practical guide for the second half of life. And I want to welcome you, Marc.
Well, thank you. It's great to be on your show.
Well, I can't believe that you haven't been on earlier, considering that your expertise is exactly what this show is about.
Yeah, I'm a rare beast.
I know, and down in Mexico at that, but we'll get to that later. You know what I like to do is just start off with a little background because, you've evolved a certain talent and became an information resource that's really important to my audience. So give us a little background, and then we'll work our way up to your book and
Sure.
some of the other issues we have.
Yeah, I'm a recovering engineer. Yes, there's a 12-step program for that.
Okay.
I started my career, spent 22 years at IBM. I claim I spent 22 years wandering around at IBM, all in Austin, Texas. Then in the late 90s, IBM screwed me in my pension. And long story short, I gave them the finger salute and left. In January of 2000, I went to work for a successful tech startup that was acquired by the sister of IBM, Lucent. Or I like to say I went to work for the Borg, and then I went to work for the sister of the Borg. And then on July 11th of 2002, I'm a big-time cyclist. I was riding my bicycle with my bicycle club. I came down a hill. I turned into a blind turn where the road was cambered the wrong way, and I hit a Toyota Corolla head-on. Our combined speeds exceeded 50 miles an hour. And I spent 5 days in the trauma center. I tore up a knee, I broke a hip, I dislocated a shoulder, broke a bunch of ribs, broke the clavicle, had imprints of the pads of the helmet in my head, but I had no internal injuries and no brain injuries I'm willing to admit to. And they had me walking on crutches in 3 days. I was back on a bike in 10 weeks, flying back to China in 4 months. And oh, by the way, I flew right smack into the middle of the SARS epidemic in Guangdong province. That's what I refer to as my WTF moment. Why am I doing this? That first tech startup left us debt free. And so I joke I suffered from what in my book I call MSU disorder. I made stuff up. I went off and taught high school math for 2 years, thinking that they would want me. And the reality is, no, they didn't. They didn't want any guy over 40. I did that for 2 years. I was highly successful, could not do that and stay healthy. I then did a 1-year stint developing a corporate fundraising program for the Jewish Community Center in Austin. That's where I joke as being a non-Jew, being the face of a Jewish organization is interesting.
I know it well.
Then I landed back at another tech startup. I joke I relapsed. And what you can see is I'm a professional career changer. And all through this, starting back in 2006, I had got involved with a job club, and I saw what was happening to folks our age. The ideas were no one was concerned about our careers because we're all going to go retire.
That's right.
And the reality is 80% of us cannot afford to retire the way our parents did.
It's an interesting point because people get confused by the statistics. I mean, apparently, we baby boomers, right, control $2 trillion worth of wealth, right? So everybody, you hear it from the millennials, who, by the way, I'm one of the few people that greatly respects them. But mostly, I'm surrounded by people sort of at two ends of the spectrum. There were a whole series, and it's interesting who they are. There's a different combination. There are the wealthy that, they started companies that became very, very wealthy, right? They're doing great, right? There's another segment of people who are doing great. Those people who were policemen, civil service workers, teachers for 20, 30, 40 years, because for the rest of their lives, they have, whether it's a $70,000 income or $110,000 income, and full health insurance, right? So those are the two communities. But people keep forgetting. And I think you mentioned it in one of your papers or in the book, or something I read that you wrote, and this is absolutely true. I know I had a big financial collapse in one of my companies as a result of 2008. But for me, okay, the company collapsed, but my peers were all of a sudden being pushed. They were the first ones being pushed out of the workforce. So I think my question to you is, and I'm not sure where your book came from. Did it come from your earlier experiences or current experiences? But is that what inspired you to really talk about the pivot you need to make?
Yeah, one of the things I said, I'm a recovering engineer, so I put everything into systems. And one of the things I started looking at, particularly back when I was at my tech startup in 2009 and 10, and I was involved with a job club. And our Friday meetings were growing to 300-400 people, all with folks that looked like us. And I started saying, okay, how did I make all these transitions? And the book is largely my stories, but also I've been coaching for the last 6 or 7 years of working with people. And I like to refer to it not as baby boomers, but those of us in the second half of life. And the mindset shift that we need to make. Because I was raised to be an employee, to work for a father-like company that would take care of me.
Right.
And then after 20, 30 years, I would ride off into the sunset. And the reality is they moved my cheese.
Right.
And many of us will need to work into our 60s and 70s. Some of us, because we want to. I don't really want to retire like my father did.
No, because then there's no life, is there?
No. And then there are others, and where I live now in Ajijic, Mexico, where we have literally thousands of what I refer to as economic refugees. They can't afford to work. They can't find jobs in the U.S. They're over 65, and all they have is Social Security. They have no money.
Right.
I follow the Boston College retirement studies, and they had an interesting where they looked at within your cohort of what was the median amount of money people had and what was the average amount. And for the 60 to 65 cohort, the average was something like $900,000. But the median was under $100,000.
Oh, wow.
I mean, the fact is just like you said, there are a lot of folks who have a lot of money. And then there are those who have very little.
That's right.
And the fact is, one of the things I focus on is how do you stay employed? And by the way, if you're going to work in your 70s, it's not going to look like you did when you're in your 40s. In fact, I was on a panel discussion with a gentleman from New Zealand about 2 years ago. And his job was to help New Zealand companies retain older workers. Ain't that interesting? And the reason why is on New Zealand, when the kids graduate from school, they leave the island. And his comment to me was, if you want to work into your 70s, you need to plan that in your 50s.
Interesting.
Because it's probably not going to be doing a single full-time job. It's going to be doing a portfolio. Plus, I have an online community right now that I've been building of mostly 55 and above. And one of the key themes has been everybody wants freedom. They want freedom to work on what they want to work, when they want to work, and how hard they want to work at it. Kind of sounds like our kids, right?
Right. Can I ask you something? Just stop
Sure.
you there for a second. What I'm interested in is, we all had our careers and we worked our way up the ladder there, and each piece had a responsibility probably appropriate to our particular age, not meaning at 32 you are a vice president or 39 you're a senior vice president, but around that. And okay, so all of a sudden we are 65 or we're 70. And the fact is, we don't have the money necessary. Some of us don't have, some people don't have the money necessary to even live day by day unless they work. So even with, some people don't have that 900,000 or even that 100,000. But my question is, what are you seeing the jobs like? So, and the reason I'm asking is because I was on a panel, and after the panel, somebody came over to me. We were talking about our perception of ourselves. And I said, my perception of myself is still young, vibrant, right? I have a lot to contribute. I know a lot more than many people younger than me know, right? And they said, how do you see yourself? I said, well, my great dream was sitting in the corner, right, with a big white head of hair and a big beard, and everybody would just knock on my door and say, David, what should I do? Right? And the reason I tell you the story is because is that the role that many of us in our more senior years can play in different organizations? Is it a wisdom role? Or what is it? What are you saying?
The answer is yes and no. I think if a company is willing to listen to us, then the answer is yes. The problem is we have a massive amount of ageism in our current employment structure that's very often very institutional. Where I see more likely is us going off and doing what we want to do. Because put it bluntly, most of us, when we started our careers, we became actors. We play roles.
That's right.
And for many of us, and I'm a big time at this one, I became really good at playing my role. And I became something that was not me. I became a geek that could speak.
Mm-hmm.
I was phenomenally good at it. And by the way, when I hit my 50s, dang it, staying in character became exhausting. And on top of that, the world is shifting and changing so much that I've been doing a whole set of presentations on creative destruction.
All right, we're going to take a break, but before we take that break, I have a question.
Sure.
Right? What's the name of the book? How do they buy it?
Is Repurpose Your Career, a practical guide for the second half of life, and that's the 3rd edition.
All right, we're going to take a break for our sponsor and some advertisers. I want to take a moment to talk to you about New Vision Eye Center. For the last couple of years, they've been a sponsor of this show, and I couldn't be prouder. I've met so many people that have walked up to me and thanked me for recommending them. I hear all sorts of stories about how they've worked miracles. And as you know, I've been a patient of New Vision Eye Center for years. So when I say go see Dr. Minotti, Reinauer, Tate, and O'Brien, it's because I wouldn't trust my eyes to anyone else. All right, we are back. I'm David Yak here. You're listening to Yak About Today, and I've got Marc Miller, whose new book, now, actually, it's not a new book. It's in its 3rd edition, I see. right?
That's right.
Repurpose Your Career, practical guide for the second half of life. You know, one of the things that caught my attention is you have a term called creative destruction, and you got to explain this.
Okay. So whenever you bring in a new technology, it replaces a technology, so it creates new jobs, but it also destroys old jobs. So creative destruction has been around for centuries. So the classic example, I got this off a Freakonomics podcast. In 1905, there were 400,000 pianos manufactured. If you wanted music in your house, you bought a piano. The phonograph was created in 1877. The radio came about by 1915, 1919. And by the way, by time World War II, Steinway actually stopped making pianos. They made coffins during World War II. Today, they make about 30,000 pianos a year. Mm-hmm. If you then go look at digital cameras, the first digital camera was created in 1975 by Kodak. By the way, they were producing digital cameras around 2000, and they were losing money. They were losing their shirts. They went out of business in 2012. Notice the time frame is compressed.
That's right.
Amazon created in 1993. Look at the havoc that Amazon has created, not just first for the book business, but now to retail. And now you have the iPhone or the smartphone. Think of what, the smartphone came out in 2007.
That's right.
Look at the havoc that has created, but also the opportunities that has created. And what's happening is everything is being accelerated. So you have to look at what are you doing? Is it still going to be around 5 years from now? Even 10 years from now? And I'll use a classic example. I had on my podcast, I had my buddy Jean Lahey on, and as we're recording this, she's on this week. She's 71. She's my image consultant back in Austin. And she has her own fulfillment by Amazon business, where her first product is a pierced earring back, not the earring, but the back.
Oh, the one that keeps the earring straight up and tight.
Yes.
I know it. I've seen it. I've seen it advertised
on Shopping Network.
Well, I don't watch that, but I've seen it on Facebook ads, I think.
And you may have seen Jean's product.
That's right.
But Jean's sourcing it in China. Mm-hmm. She sells it on Amazon. She's running Facebook and Amazon ads. She's rebranded under the brand Wardrobe Jazz. And the idea here is she's running a location independent business, and next thing she's going to do is a second product and a third product. You couldn't do that 5 years ago.
That's right. That's right.
Think about what we're doing here. We're talking across a free piece of software, Skype. You're putting up essentially a podcast or a radio show.
That's right.
You're reaching thousands of listeners.
That's right.
And you're doing it out of your house.
That's right. So I think it's interesting what you're saying, because the first part is how technology totally disrupts, right? But it has an upside. It's about us learning how to make use of the technology in order to have that upside, right? And it creates a lot of opportunity. So you know what I want to jump to right now is, because I know we're going to be out of time in about 2 minutes, right? I really do want to talk about ageism. AARP, which I greatly, greatly respect, is a whole new, ageism, section of everything they put out. And we talk a lot about it. And mostly when we talk, everybody gives me their experiences of ageism. Or when I went back to, at one point I ran for WPP worldwide, all their digital technologies in 120 something offices. And when I decided, after a couple of years, I said, I need to go back. And the first reaction to me is, David, there's no place for people like you anymore, right? That was ageism, I believe. It had nothing to do with what I was going to contribute or not. So we all have our stories about ageism. I'm not seeing the proposals or some kind of mechanism that goes out into the world and explains what ageism is and how I'm not sure I can articulate this, but I'm going to try, how we can push ageism by showing people our value. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah. I mean, I interviewed Ashton Applewhite on my podcast earlier this year. She just published the book, This Chair Rocks.
Right.
And ageism goes 360 degrees. We are all ageist. The kids have as much problem with ageism as we do. The one thing that she pushes is the only person we can change is us. So, and the one comment she uses, we use the term senior moment. Right. Oh yes, I had a senior moment. Well, when you were 16 and couldn't find your car keys, did you say you had a junior moment?
It's funny, I never thought of that.
Right. Well, the key piece is the first thing is ageism is the only socially acceptable form of discrimination. And this is not going to go away overnight, but we need to change that. And the start out is with our own behaviors and start modeling and be able to call out when you see ageism, is to be able to, at that point, saying that's an ageist. And I even had that at my own, in my last tech startup, where I had my own boss say, didn't want to hire someone I wanted to hire because, they don't have the energy.
That's a different thing. The energy thing, they use excuses for ageism.
Well, it's an ageist. It's a way of saying that person is too old. It's code.
That's right.
And learning to identify that.
Mark, I got to stop here. The name of the book again, where they can get it?
Is Repurpose Your Career, a practical guide for the second half of life. It's on Amazon and all the other fine online retailers.
All right. I really want to thank you. And by the way, to all the listeners out there, this guy and I are going to talk more. I can already tell. So, again, thanks so much. And so that's it for now. Stay tuned for the all-new Yak About Today when Season 6 begins. Peace.
And walk yourself to the laundromat. And when you finish doing that, bring in the dog, put out the cat. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.